Okay, so thanks for agreeing to be interviewed. The first question we wanted to ask is, what's Iceland's perspective on the different challenges physically and environmentally between Iceland and Baltic Sea region states, given the geographical distances? What are the challenges do you see, and what are the discussions which keep coming up that are different, but being in a Baltic, part of the Baltic Sea region area and part of the Nordic Council that you have to take part in?
Very good question. Obviously we face different challenges. Iceland being way out there in the North Atlantic, in the open sea, surrounded by the open seas, whereas the Baltics have this landlocked sea. So the environmental challenges in terms of sustainable development are quite different. We are blessed and graced in Iceland with an abundance of hydroelectricity and geothermal energy. We have developed enormous know-how in sustainable management of our natural resources, such as fisheries and energy resources. And this is something we can bring to the table in the cooperation in the Baltic Sea and also in the Arctic Council. So I think we have a lot to offer. At the same time, we can learn a lot from our partners in the Baltic Sea. And I'm sometimes reminded of a story I heard. One of my colleagues, a diplomat, was talking to a Chinese diplomat, and he said to the Chinese diplomat, "Look, you are over 1 billion. We are only 320,000 people. Can you imagine what we can achieve if we join forces and work together?" In a way, Iceland is a small country, but we enjoy and benefit a lot from international and regional cooperation because it empowers us, and we can bring to the table our know-how, and we can learn from our partners within the region. So although we are different, face different challenges, we can cooperate, and we should use these differences to regionally to work towards these common goals.
Yeah, to achieve the sustainable development goals. Second question, and I don't want to take a lot of your time. Second question is given your background in trade negotiations, that now that CETA looks like it's going to be ratified, and now EU is looking towards the international trade agreement with the United States in the future, and let's forget about the Trump election for a moment. What are the challenges I foresee, and maybe you can comment on that from your position now and your experience as a trade negotiator, that Latvia, Lithuania, and Finland have yet to ratify the Paris Agreement. And so we talk about environmental challenges, and we look at the US and say, they're lagging behind in certain aspects. But at home, within the Baltic regions, we have 3 countries which have not ratified. So how would you like to comment on that, if you could?
On the Paris Agreement and the lack of ratification among these, well, I'm sure it's just a question of time that they ratify. I would certainly hope so. It's obviously extremely important that we all ratify. The Paris Agreement is one of the most important agreements we have reached as an international community in recent years. It's about the future of the planet, and I'm sure our partners and friends that you mentioned are fully aware of that and are on their way to ratify it. We fortunately have ratified. We already did that in September, so we were able to participate in a certain event or a celebration at the UN General Assembly to celebrate the ratification of the Paris Agreement. It's very important for Iceland, it's very important for all the global community that we ratify and continue to work towards it.
So the follow-up question to that is, do you think this is going to come up in the agreement which EU will hope to sign, the bilateral trade agreement, certain aspects of environmental challenges which we face here and as a region, would they come up with in terms of when we negotiate with the United States, which might not have been dealt with when CETA was being discussed?
Well, I must admit I'm not an expert in CETA or the bilateral negotiations between the EU and the US, but free trade agreements and international agreements have developed you see them develop from one generation to another. And a lot of new commitments or old commitments have been developed to reflect the realities of international cooperation. I can name, for example, human rights. They are more and more being taken on board in these free trade agreements. The same, I'm sure, with the commitments we have under climate change or the emission of greenhouse gas or the Paris Agreement. I'm sure that these commitments will also be reflected in these free trade agreements if they're not already, but in the future.